Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today it is time to talk about Towers of Midnight, the 13th book in the Wheel of Time, and this one once again is by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson, because of course the last 3 books in the series are. And this one was a great experience for me. I did post a review on Goodreads, just a tiny one, just to update that I had finished the book, but this video and my spoiler chats in general are where I'm really able to get my thoughts out. So like I said, I really did enjoy this one, and I'm not sure exactly still where I fall, even having finished it a couple of days ago. Somewhere though between 4.5 and 5, so a great rating nonetheless, and definitely one of the better books in the series for me. I don't know where exactly it ranks, but it is everything is just building to the climax and you can feel it, and I love that about this. So with that being said, Towers of Midnight did have a lot of setup and you could feel that happening, and we're finally moving the set pieces into place for A Memory of Light, which I think is going to be an explosive conclusion. I can't imagine it any other way, but regardless, Towers of Midnight did have some really cool plots in itself while it was doing all this legwork. And one thing that I noticed a lot in this book, and I'm not sure, I didn't notice it in The Gathering Storm, but maybe it was there as well, was, in my opinion, there's been an improvement in the male-female interactions and relationships. So I never thought that that was Robert Jordan's strength, but I was willing to overlook it because there were so many other things that I loved about the series, like the world politics, like individual characters, etc. But I'm not sure if this is because the characters have grown and we are looking at some more mature characters, and therefore we're seeing the evolution in the way that they interact. But part of me thinks that Brandon Sanderson is better at writing male-female interactions, and it's coming through on the page. So whichever one of those it is, I am happy to see that because I'm enjoying it more. There are so many more interactions between male and female characters now where I don't cringe. I actually really like what's happening in them. So that's definitely a plus. And then as always, I'm going to sort of get into all of the main plots and what I think of them. But the first important thing of note at the beginning of this book is that Graendal is still alive, and she has the dream spike, which becomes relevant throughout the book. But she's in contact with Moradin, and there's definitely some scheming going on there because I don't remember when exactly it's revealed. It might be a little bit later on and not at the very beginning, but they have prophecies that say that Perrin Ibarra will die at their hands. And I have a little bit to say about the commentary on prophecies later on, but that's interesting. So you're a little bit worried about Perrin throughout this book. And I am gonna start with Perrin's storyline, not just because it relates to the Graendal and Moradin stuff, but just because he had a big chunk of this book. And I liked what they did with Perrin in The Gathering Storm, but I think that I can say that in this book, in Towers of Midnight, Perrin is finally back on form in terms of being interesting again. And I am so happy about it because in the first 4 to 5, definitely the first 4 books, Perrin was pretty much my favorite character. And other characters have jumped past him on that list, a lot of other characters have jumped past him on that list because I really feel like he was neglected through the middle of the series. But I really loved what was done with his character in this book, so I'm glad that he's back. And so one thing that's important to mention in relation to Perrin's storyline is that Galad is recognized as the full-on leader of the White Cloaks with no divisions between their companies very shortly before they meet Perrin. And I am glad that this went this direction because you definitely, in terms of the actual in-world reasoning, you definitely have some Ta'veren stuff going on here, but in terms of themes and plot threads, this book had a lot about Perrin facing up to his past. And so this, in my opinion, was really necessary for him to confront the White Cloaks, but maybe not as some faceless evil, but with an actual face in Galad that he can perhaps actually, like, they can maybe come to terms with each other. And another aspect of this book that was explored, like with Perrin, was that he needs to come to terms with the wolf dream. He needs to face up to that. So this book had a lot of really important milestone moments for Perrin. And so the important thing in the wolf dream, this book, was his interactions with Hopper, and Hopper trying to teach him the ways of the wolf dream and how to like control it and actually become like proficient at being there. And so this obviously helps Perrin with facing Slayer. And so this is kind of the mystery of the book, is like Perrin doesn't know what this dream spike is. He knows that someone is trying to trap them because gateways don't work, and you know that Slayer is an enemy, but Perrin doesn't know who he is. And this is a very foreboding sense throughout the entirety of that plot line, but I loved that confrontation between them when Perrin finally finds the dream spike and then he hops all the way to Tar Valon, and he does manage to destroy the dream spike by throwing it into a nightmare. And when he crosses over with Egwene, that was super cool. And I also loved that the wolf that he initially thought was a man that had lost himself was someone who had actually chosen that deliberately. And so there was so much that we learned about the wolf dream and the world of dreams, because they're one and the same in this book. And so that was a great storyline for Perrin. And then the other, like, real world, if you will, storyline for Perrin was something that I also really enjoyed, because I loved the dynamic between Galad, Morghese, and Perrin, and Faile, because Faile has an interesting relationship now with coming to terms with who Morghese actually is. And the whole thing, like especially Morghese and Galad and Perrin and everything to do with that trial, I loved it, because Galad definitely shows some character development here too. Like, he is a genuinely good man on the inside, but he needs to start seeing things in shades of gray. And Morghese is in that unique position because of her relationship with both of them, and Perrin is really just trying to face up to what he genuinely did do, but he's trying to defeat the false charges against him, like being a dark friend and such. So I loved all of that, and I loved how it finally culminated in Perrin defending the White Cloaks against the Trollocs. And I really loved how you didn't necessarily know his plan. I sometimes have a problem with the author keeping things from you even when you're in a character's head, but this one was for a short enough period of time that I thought that it did a really good job of raising the tension, because Faile and Berelain are genuinely, like, Faile's not worried, but you wonder, like, is Perrin about to attack the White Cloaks? And the answer is no. And I'm glad, like, I loved seeing that, and I loved them realizing, and Galad realizing, that Perrin was coming to their aid, and Bornhald actually killing Bayer because he realizes that Perrin didn't kill his father. And there was so much to love about that. And then they finally, like, I mean, they do form an alliance, because you know that the White Cloaks are a wild card, so Perrin needs their allegiance at least a little bit, and so they go and meet Rand and all of the other nations at this huge meeting. And one thing that I'll mention in regards to the male-female relationships is Perrin and Faile's dynamic is so much better in this book. Like, I have problems with them going all the way back, like, to my Shadow Rising spoiler chat, and I talked about this and I was not on board. But, like, this book, honest to God, is the first time that I've actually been able to be like, oh yeah, okay, like, maybe they do love each other, you know, like, it's actually being shown on page. And I'm still not fully on board with them because of the entire history and the, like, domestic abuse. Like, I know that this world is different, but it doesn't stop me from hating it. But this book actually showed, like, positive sides of their relationship. Like I thought that they had some really healthy interactions, and I liked that. So I think that that's all I have to say about Perrin for the moment, and in between bigger storylines, I'm just going to interject here to say how much I love Lan's little storyline that is sprinkled throughout and what he is building. The stuff with Lan makes me so emotional because he doesn't want to put anyone else in danger, but regardless of whatever he tries to do to be like stoic and aloof and alone, Malkier and the other Borderlanders are rallying to him anyway. Lan is such a legend, and they all remember Malkier, and I love that. It makes me so happy. That is one of those things where you cut to that perspective for like a few pages or whatever it is, and then it just fills my heart because I love everybody supporting Lan. So next up we have Rand's storyline, and he didn't have as much in this book as he did in the previous one, but in my opinion what he did have speaks volumes, and we're really ready to see what he'll do next book, because he still did things in this book, but like in my opinion you can just see how much he has grown after his huge character development moment at the end of The Gathering Storm. I loved his characterization in this book, especially with Tam and Min and Cadswan and Nynaeve. Like, he is able to be so much more open and genuine with these people, and that is who I feel like Rand really was the whole time, rather than what he was trying to make himself into. But we had that other version of him for so long that it's easy to forget. But I love his characterization in this book. And another moment that I love is Rand and Egwene in the White Tower speaking as equals. That's amazing. Like, I love that they both respect each other. This also goes back to the interactions between male and female characters, because Egwene and Rand have both grown a lot individually, yes, and so they're coming at this from a different perspective than they would have had previously, but I just have a feeling that this interaction would have had a different tone in past books, and I loved what we did get, because even though they were disagreeing with each other, there was an understanding and a respect. And so a couple of other things that Rand did that were important in this book is saving the capital of Arad Doman, and after he left it before, and he like obviously feels guilt about that, and so that was definitely going a long way to like right some of his wrongs. And then the other thing was that he gains the support basically of the Borderlanders. After he saves Meridon and we see a bunch of fighting against Trollocs from the perspective of Rodel Iturald. I don't exactly know how to say that name, but he's one of the great generals, and I did greatly enjoy those chapters. I thought that they were really interesting, especially the fact that there was a dark friend controlling the city that wouldn't let them in. But Rand comes and saves them after they are near to falling, even though they were defending themselves very well. But then he goes and meets with the Borderlanders in Far Madding, and he hears their prophecies and they all hit him. That was kind of bizarre, but he has some great interactions with them and with Cadswan in this situation, and this is where some of the commentary on prophecies comes in my opinion, because you have, like, it's becoming clear that every single group of people have prophecies about the dragon, or whatever they call him, because they have different names for him. And so I think that what's becoming clear eventually is that there's probably a grain of truth in every single one of them, but they're all contradictory. So I think that what they're really trying to hammer home here is that prophecies end up being like what might happen, not necessarily what is going to happen, because you pretty much can't have all of these prophecies be true unless I really combed through them and compared them to each other. But based on what we've seen so far, I think that this is going to be a lesson where people, like each peoples, are going to find that there was some truth to their prophecies. And I think that that's really interesting. Next up, we have Elaine's plotline. And so Elaine holds the throne at the beginning of this book. And the important thing here is that she has a bunch of armies camped around the city, and at first she initially does not realize that Mat and the Band of the Red Hand is there. And like, one important thing that she does earlier on in the book is that her and Mat strike a deal with each other, and she's able to study Mat's medallion and make some copies, and she uses them to, well, okay, she doesn't directly use them, but she brings them with her, and she tries to impersonate one of the Forsaken, and she ends up, well, she's in danger. She almost like gets herself killed, but she uses them to kill some of the Black Aja and to, does she kill Malar? You know what, I don't think she manages to kill him, but he's the worst. And so the other thing, like the basis of the deal with Mat was that she agrees to start constructing the dragons, which are the cannons basically, for Mat and Aludra and for the defense of Andor, because obviously as a part of this deal, she is going to be the main like distributor of these weapons. And going back once again to this trend, I love the interactions between Mat and Elaine, and I'll include Brigitte in this as well. And these were strong even earlier in the series. So I give credit where credit is due to Robert Jordan, but I just love the two of them together. Like, Mat is a handful, but Elaine is less refined than people give her credit for. Like, she is a queen through and through, but she's also very casual sometimes, and I just love the way that her and Mat act. Like, he'll say something absolutely ridiculous that someone else would take offense to, and Elaine will just laugh because she knows who Mat is. So I really enjoyed a lot of that. And the other thing that happened in terms of reunions is that Elaine reunites with Morghese and both of her brothers at separate points, or at least Galad and Morghese would have been there at the same time, and then Gawain would have been separate. But I really, really liked their, I don't know, not too much of their interactions were shown on page, but Elaine and Morghese was, and I really, really like how proud of Elaine Morghese is and everything, and Elaine wanting her help with things, and the fact that they team up to meet with Perrin and Fail, and they end up allowing Perrin rule of the Two Rivers, of course under a bunch of conditions, and under the fact that like Rand is going to give Perrin the Two Rivers to make it seem legit in the eyes of other nations and nobles and things. But there's so much to love about the interactions there, and then the final important thing that Elaine does is to make a move for the throne of Cairhien. And I really like the clever way that she does this, and the politics between like the nobles of Cairhien have never been my favorite because I have trouble remembering all of the factions there. But I do like that Elaine is being shown to kind of manipulate them and play them off one another, and I really hope that it works for her, honestly. But once again, we finish with them going to Rand's meeting, and Elaine comes with both Andor and Cairhien and is ready to meet with everyone else. So next up is Egwene, and of course I mentioned in Rand's storyline the fact that Rand and Egwene met, and Egwene during this meeting and the White Tower also discovered that he plans to break the final seals on the Dark One's prison. And so this is obviously very alarming to Egwene, and she tries throughout this book to rally support to her cause, to oppose Rand and to try and talk him out of this because they don't want the seals broken, because that is an extremely dangerous thing to do. But the other important thing going on in the White Tower during this book is that there is an assassin in their midst, and Egwene is hunting for Missana as this murderer. And so she is like, she's laying plans while Gawain is attempting to protect her against her wishes. So she is not overly happy with him, and they suggest that he just goes to Andor to visit Elaine, and so he leaves for a while because he doesn't feel welcome. But while he's in Camelin, he discovers that there is a totally separate set of Seanchan assassins, so the assumption that the assassin or murderer was Mesaana was incorrect, even though Egwene thinks that it's just Mesaana and that she is just hunting for one of the Forsaken. Not that that's a small job either. But I really do love the way that this all played out because the timing was critical. Perrin, we already talked about his storyline, but Perrin was jumping to Tar Valon with the Dream Spike, which means that you can't weave gateways. And so Gawain comes back to Tar Valon at exactly the right time, or else he would not have been able to return. So he goes to find Egwene, who is sleeping, because Egwene's plan takes place in the world of dreams, and Egwene set up a meeting with like the Wise Ones and with some other sisters, like some other Aes Sedai, to try and lure Mesaana and the Black Aja into like spying on them so that they could catch them. But then everything kind of happens at once because they end up having a full-on battle because Mesaana and the Black Aja just attacked them. They like came fully intending to attack them. They weren't taken in by the trap. But the Aes Sedai and the Wise Ones are really good at fighting back, but the thing is, they're all asleep. So Egwene is asleep, but the Seanchan blood knife assassins are in the waking world, and she is in danger. And so Gawain, once again, kind of against her wishes, against her orders, does come to defend her, but this time it is absolutely necessary. And this, like, I loved the way that all of this was playing out simultaneously, because the battle in the world of dreams was extremely cool, and we see Perrin unravel Balefire, which has huge implications like for what you can do in the world of dreams, and he taught Egwene something huge there that comes back to help her. And this is all happening while Gawain is fighting off the assassins in the real world, and Egwene is captured by Mesaana, but Mesaana is underestimating Egwene's practice in the world of dreams because, so much like Perrin, once again, having to face his past and face up to a lot of things this book, Egwene has to face up to the Idam. And Mesaana traps her with one, but Egwene has to overcome her fear and anxiety to realize that she can impose her will upon it because this is the world of dreams. And so she literally overcomes the Idam and manages to unlock it, and in the process literally like breaks Mesaana's mind. And Gawain does manage to fight off the blood knives by extinguishing all light because they fight in shadow and they have Terangriel that allow them to blur themselves, but he fights extremely well, but he still is like grievously injured. And so Egwene bonds him to save his life. And I thought that their storyline was sweet in this book and I liked it, but on the whole, they are a couple that I don't really get it. Like, I don't understand them loving each other, and I don't feel like I've been shown the reasons why. Even though, like, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm glad that they had this journey, this book, in order for her to bond him. So I'm fine with that. And I did like Gawain more in this book. I thought that he became more complex and he learned something. And yeah, so that was very important. Another one of the Forsaken is off the board. And then finally, once again, their storyline culminates in them being at the meeting place for Rand. And Gawain also sees his mother arriving with Elaine, and that's a great moment. And I think that that's about all I want to say about Egwene's storyline. And then finally, last but definitely not least, because it is my favorite character, we have Mat's storyline. So at the start of this book, Mat overlaps quite a bit with Elaine. So I talked about how they came to a deal together where Mat gets his dragons built, Elaine gets to use them and own them and borrow Mat's medallion as well. So all of that is sort of culminating in one storyline together. But the other thing that Mat is dealing with at the start of this book is that once again the Golem is chasing him and catches him outside at their camp outside of Camelin and like kills a couple of his men, and obviously that strikes deep at Mat because he feels responsible for their deaths. And so he is kind of worried about the golem for a good portion of this book, and I don't remember at what point exactly. It might have been around the halfway point of the book, where him and Talmanas have been plotting on how they're going to deal with this thing and if they're able to kill the golem. So basically, they have set up this opportunity for the golem to attack. And what they managed to end up doing is they lead it to a building where they want to lead it to. And they set the building on fire, which I don't think is intentional, but it ended up helping. And so they end up being able to push the golem into a gateway for skimming. So rather than a regular gateway, it's one of the ones that we saw being used more often earlier in the series, where it's basically a black abyss with like a platform where you can then travel to different places. And so that is like their hope was that now the golem will just be falling endlessly because who knows what's in that abyss. And I hope that they're right, because that thing is the worst, and it's gross, and it's unsettling. Honestly, that is a pretty terrifying creature. I thought that that was really well done. And then finally, as they've been planning for at least a book now, I'm surprised, to be honest, that this happened so close to the end of the book, but it was a very climactic thing. So Matt, Tom, and Noel finally make their way to the Tower of Genji, or Genji, I don't really know, with the objective of rescuing Moraine, who they hope is still alive in there. And they've armed themselves with like fire and music and iron, all of the things that legend says and the rules of the game say that they can use to defend themselves against the Elfin and the Eilfin. Eilfin and Eilfin? I don't know. But I thought that this place, once they're inside, was really well done and really creepy, because they enter, and of course this place is like a maze and a labyrinth. Like if you go down one hallway and then you go down another hallway and then you come back, you're not necessarily in the same place that you just were. Like, it is so confusing and you don't know where you are. It's not straightforward at all. So I really enjoyed the way that Matt's luck came into play here, because they used his luck to decide which way to go. And the cool thing about this is that if they go straight, and then they go back the way they came, then they go straight again, and then they go back the way they came, they're not going between the same two rooms. They are in like 5 different places, because that's just how time and space work in this realm. And I really loved the way that Matt's luck actually worked to do that. And so they come to a few places that Matt recognizes. There's the room where the ter'angreal was that Moraine entered through, but it's of course melted since her and Lanfear came through it. And then they eventually find Moraine in the bargaining hall, like in the main central room. And so I was kind of surprised at how quickly this happened, but I did feel like they went through enough danger on the way there that it was okay with me, like it was worth it. And they bargain, or I should say Matt bargains for Moraine and bargains for them to leave, but what he neglects to mention is the Eilfin. So he mentions the Eilfin and says that they can't like hurt them or obstruct them on their way out, but he doesn't mention the snakes. He only mentions the foxes. So this oversight becomes clear very quickly when they are chased by the snakes. But Noel this entire time has been a rather unassuming mystery of a character, and I had a feeling that I knew who he was, but I wasn't sure, and we got it confirmed for us in this one, because Noel, or aka Jane Farstrider, stays behind to sacrifice himself so that Matt, Tom, and Moraine can get out safely, because they need to go back the same way that they came to enter a different room, but they can't go back the way that they came if they're being chased. So Noel, or Jane, sacrifices himself. I thought that it was so cool to discover who he was and how his story will end, and the fact that because Matt and Tom and Moraine got out, he'll be able to be remembered and the story will continue. But of course, before they get out, it looks like they're in trouble. And the thing that I liked about this was that it is such a strong callback to earlier in the series, because when Matt exits this realm the first time. He mentions it himself in this book. He never questions their gift of his spear or his ashen darai or whatever it actually is. I think it's not exactly a spear, but he never questions it because it seems like something that they've just given him. But then in this moment, he realizes that because he asked for a way out, that means that is the way out, and it's a key, and he uses it. So I thought that that was so cool, and I love the way that they managed to get out. I did think that, I still thought that it happened quickly, given that Brigitte said that she was in there for 2 months, but the way that it happened, like the way that it all played out, I really loved that. And then after they're out, we learned that Moiraine's power has been drained and she needs the Sa'angreal to channel with strength. And Moiraine and Tom are in love. And this is the thing that I was not expecting. It very much caught me off guard. But part of me the whole time, like the entire series, wondered why Tom was there. Like, at the very start of the Eye of the World and throughout Eye of the World, I'm thinking, I know Tom is a gleeman and he travels, but he was a court bard, and he could definitely get a job, and like, why does he want to be here? Like, with Moiraine and Lan and the kids, like, why? And so I don't really remember, like, I don't know if it's just been a long time since we've had Moiraine present in a book. And I think that Tom and Moiraine were in Cairhien at the same time. I don't know, I'm struggling to remember and to wrap my head around this because I just didn't see it coming. I did not see Tom and Moiraine coming. I'm pretty cool with it because I think that Tom and Moiraine are both super cool characters in their own right, and seeing them together, you know, like, I don't have really any negative feelings about it. It's fine, I'm just taken aback. So that is almost all that I have to say, really, since we finished with that storyline. But of course, the culmination of this book was that most of the nations of the world are represented at Rand's meeting, and Tuon, or Fortuona, is plotting about how to basically overthrow the White Tower and throw everything into chaos. And I really, truly do not know how things are going to be resolved with the Seanchan. Oh my god, I forgot to mention Aviendha. That is an extremely important storyline. Okay, well, the video is about to be a little longer because, oh my god. So this was a huge question that I had after finishing this book, is Aviendha saw what she thinks is the future in Ruadine because she was shown the past the last time. And it was really interesting, but my question is this a future that must come to pass, or are these possibilities? And of course, there's really no way to answer that right now, because who knows if the final book will even resolve that, because all of this happened after the last battle anyway, because it was the future. But it doesn't bode well for like the Seanchan and everybody else. And so I'm really hoping that things don't go that far south between them. I'm really hoping that Aviendha can come back and somehow manage to change the course of history, give a warning. Yeah, that has massive implications. So you've got what your main characters are doing, your core characters, I should say, but then you've also got what Aviendha and Tuon were doing. And that is like less important for the immediate last battle, but extremely important overall. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the implications of that are. And now that I've basically worn out my voice and my throat, I had a lot of fun talking about this, but that is basically it. Those are my thoughts on this book, and there was, of course, like a lot to unpack because so many important things happened in this one, and I don't even know how long my spoiler chat for A Memory of Light will be, because I'm sure it'll be insane. But yeah, so please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. I will be continuing these videos obviously with A Memory of Light, and let me know down in the comments what you thought of this. This was a phenomenal book, so I would really love to chat with you about it. And I, as always, will have all of my socials, Discord, and Patreon linked down in the description if you're interested in any of that stuff. And with that said, I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!